Alrighty, so I want to tell you about a run I had yesterday morning, actually. This was the first run I had of the day, and this run had me so angry I could hardly see straight. Unfortunately, it's one of those runs that, regardless of how angry I am, I had to keep my composure because the person that I was dealing with on that run didn't need to be exposed to me being angry. So it was the very first run of the day, about 7:15 in the morning. Normally, the first thing I do when I leave the sub is I go to my favorite gas station and get my favorite gas station coffee. And then I'm driving around. Here's railroad tracks again. I'm driving around, sipping on my coffee, and after I've had about a quarter of my cup of coffee, I'm ready to deal with the public. But yesterday, I did not get that opportunity because there was a run holding. It seemed like it was an emergency, and the dispatcher had to send it to us right away. The run was a woman calling in. It was a domestic dispute. A woman called in, said she's having problems with her unruly 15-year-old son. Now, if I haven't had my coffee and I have to go deal with a mom complaining about her unruly 15-year-old son, and it, you know, school's starting up, so we're already like, okay, it's a kid that doesn't want to go to school. That is a bad combination because everybody knows we hate taking those runs in the first place. So we drive up to this house, park a couple doors. We ended up passing the location. I parked a couple houses north of it. It's on a one-way street. And we're walking back towards the house. Well, one house north of the location where we were going, there's two kids sitting out on the front porch. I looked over at them. One was kind of smiling, and they were both looking at us curious. Why are the police walking up to us? We weren't there for them, and I wanted to kind of disarm them. That's one thing that I do. This road is bumpy today. So I looked over at him and I said hi, and the one kid kind of waved back. The other kid just kind of stared at me blankly. For lack of a better term, he looked like he was stoned. He was just kind of sitting there, blank-faced. And I smiled. I go, dude, you don't look like you're up yet. You look like you're ready to go back to bed. And he just very simply goes, no, I'm awake. Which, I thought that was an odd response, but nonetheless, we moved on to the right house. So we go, we knock on this door. A kid comes to the door and says, I'll go get her, and it took another 5 minutes. Finally, this really large woman comes down to the door, walks out on the porch wearing a little like t-shirt nightgown. She was very large. She wasn't wearing any undergarments. It was painfully obvious. And then she sat down on like a stool on the front porch. She's up on the porch, I'm down on the ground. I had to move because I was in the line of fire, and I didn't want to see what was being presented. Let's put it that way. So I walked out in the yard, and my buddy is talking to her, and she starts telling us a story about how she works third shift, and she came home this morning, is telling her son to get up. Her son was tired, refusing to get out of bed. Finally, he got out of bed, but he had missed his bus. When he realized he missed his bus, he became angry, started throwing rocks at the caller's car. That's what she told us. And then he walked off, and she had no idea where he went. Then she starts complaining that she doesn't know where her son is, yada, yada, yada. Realizing that this was very quickly turning into a conversation where she was going to want us to take a missing persons report on her son, because this is a very common thing to do, and it's the type of thing where if somebody asks us for it, we don't have a lot of leeway as far as whether or not we're going to take that report. So my buddy starts saying, okay, so your son has left. That's the real reason we're here. Do you know where he might have gone? And she says no. And so then he's asking all the usual questions, like, does he have any friends that live in the area, that lives nearby? When he gets angry, does he have any place that he goes? You know, that kind of stuff. And at that point in time, she stands up and she goes, well, he does have a friend that lives next door. She looks next door and she goes, there's my son. He's on the porch right there. And she says his name. I'm going to say his name was Taiwan. Taiwan? I don't know. We'll go Taiwan. She says his name. She's like, Taiwan. And he stands up and he looks at us. So I start calling his name. I'm like, hey, man, what's going on? Like, Are you having a bad day? Or I was like, dude, what's going on with you and your mom today? He stands up, doesn't look at me, doesn't respond to me, starts walking. He walks out to the sidewalk and then starts walking southbound on the street. Look, and he actually walks right by the gate to their fence in the front yard. And I'm thinking, oh, great, like this kid's about to take off. So I start to position myself, you know, out on the sidewalk so I can at least be within arm's reach of this kid. Now, the way he was responding to us, or his lack of response, he wasn't looking us in the eye. He wasn't acting and responding the way you would expect a kid in his situation to respond. I looked up at the mom and I said, is he autistic? And that's when she said, well, yeah, he's autistic. This woman came home from work, tried to wake up her autistic son, who, for some reason, he was having a bad day. This is something that you have to learn to deal with when you have a child with autism. I don't have any children with autism, but I've been around the world long enough, and she has one that's 15 years old. She should have known this by now. Yes, he's having a bad day and he might have outbursts, and you have to find a way to deal with these outbursts. Calling the police is not the way to deal with these outbursts. But more importantly, if you are going to call the police about your 15-year-old son who has autism and is having an outburst, maybe when you call the police, you should let them know, hey, I have a 15-year-old son with autism and he's having an outburst. I need some help today. If I was responding to that call, I would have responded in a completely different way than what I did. And that's very important. And it's one of those things, it's very unfortunate that often police officers are put into these situations where they don't have all the information. The people who called did have the right information, but they didn't share that information with us. So now I have a kid that's about to walk away from his mom's house. If I didn't have the wherewithal to recognize that he has autism, I might have grabbed onto that kid, I might have tackled that kid, or if I grabbed onto his arm and he swatted me away, imagine my response as a police officer to that kind of interaction, had I not known that he had autism. When I realized what was going on, I gave him his space, and I walked over, I stood in front of him, he actually sat down on the ground, leaned up against the fence, and then I could see what he had in his hands. He was holding his lunch in his hand. He had like a sandwich in some kind of clear plastic bag. It wasn't a Ziploc. It looked like an old bread bag or something. Had a sandwich in there. Had another Ziploc bag with some fruit. Ooh, sorry, it's a long day. You know, he had his lunch with him. So I said, you know, did you miss the bus this morning? He said, yes. And I said, why are you angry? And he wouldn't respond to that. I said, are you angry because you missed the bus and you want to go to school? He said, yes. And I was kind of awestruck, because here I am talking to this kid. He's giving me all the information that I need to help him out. I look up at the mom, and all she's doing is bitching about the fact that she works third shift and that her son's not listening to her. We needed to solve this solution. So, and I don't know, I just had the feeling that the mother was worthless at this point. So I looked down at the kid and I said, would you like a ride to school? He said, yes, I would like a ride to school. So I asked him where the school was. It was actually probably a 25-minute drive from where we were, which is not something that we would typically do. But for this kid in this situation, I felt like it was 100% the appropriate thing to do. So he walked over, got in the back of our police car. We punched in the address and the GPS, drove him to school. The funny thing is, when we got up there, you know, we have these seatbelt alarms in the back that if you take the seatbelt off, an alarm goes off. Well, I didn't warn him about that, and I didn't really want to, like, weird him out or anything. Tell him, you know, depending on his level of function, if I told him there's an alarm in the back seat, it might have, like, really freaked him out. So I just kind of left that alone. He took off the seatbelt, and we had to jump out and run to the back to reconnect the seatbelt. But we're in front of his school, which is a school like specially designed for people with special needs. And some teacher comes out and she's like, oh, well, thanks for announcing that you guys are here, guys. She holds the door open. The guy just runs into the building. He was very happy that he was at school. The teacher asked, like, Is there anything that we need to know about? Because it's not very often that a student gets driven right to the front door of the school and is escorted in by 2 police officers. And I don't know if I should say this part or not, but I looked at her and I said, yeah, his mom's worthless. And she goes, nope, I understand that. Kid went to school. It's one of those situations that is just infuriating to me. And it's also a kind of, this is the kind of stuff that feeds into the narrative that police officers don't know what they're doing, that they don't know how to handle people, all this other stuff. Because had I not made that connection very quickly, which, to be honest, when I asked if he has autism, I was taking a giant leap. He could have just been really tired. It's hard to tell, and some people might have been offended by that question. And we all know autism is a spectrum, and he might have been undiagnosed at that time, but whatever. If I didn't have some of the very specific experience that I have in my life and with some of the people that I've dealt with over the years, that could have been a very different situation. You know, Mom never felt at any point in time it was important to give us that information. And of all the things that happened in that run, the fact that he has autism was probably the most important part. And if I hadn't figured it out when I did, it could have easily turned into like a use of force situation. And next thing you know, my name is in the newspaper and I'm on the news on videotape wrestling with some kid, you know, being called a dumb cop. I don't know. It's one of those things. Gonna leave it there.